Hi, I'm Liz, and welcome to LizCapism. In the lead up to the Costube Symposium, which is happening at the end of the summer, a series of questions were prepared from which Costubers could choose 21 to answer as a kind of get-to-know-you video leading up to the symposium. So, without any further ado, I'm going to dive into these 21 questions for 2021 Costube. So let's go. What originally got you into costuming, cosplay, living history, etc.? The short answer is Annika Victoria, who I came across when I was looking for ways to update my current wardrobe with minor sewing techniques, and the algorithm did its thing. I'm gonna link her YouTube channel and her Instagram below. She herself doesn't do costuming videos, but because the algorithm picked up on the sewing theme, I came across some other costubers, and the rest is history. The longer story is that I knew how to sew from a very young age, but never really got interested in it, so I kind of left it alone as this skill that I trotted out only when necessary. And then a couple of things happened all at once. I was getting a little bit more into environmental causes, trying to reduce my fast fashion consumption. I was also trying to reduce the amount of things that I threw away. So I started looking on YouTube for tutorials on how to make clothes and how to adapt clothes that I already owned. At the same time, a bunch of my friends started having kids, and so I was making burping cloths and onesies, and so I had trotted out my sewing machine for the first time in about 5 years. The fact that the sewing machine was out and that I was looking at these ways that I could adapt clothing just kind of combined, and the algorithm did its thing. It was a combination of a latent skill and all of my friends having babies and environmentalism. So yay! What are your favorite materials to work with? I love working with linen. The feeling of linen I find to be so gratifying, especially when I'm hand sewing it. I can't even explain it. It's such a very specific sensory experience. I love, love, love working with linen. Always I will choose linen if it is within the realm of possibility. It is such a nice fabric to work with. It feels so nice. What is your dream event or photo shoot opportunity? I have a fantasy for post-Panda times where I will be hosting some sort of historical event at the Banff Springs Hotel. It's a huge historic hotel in Banff in Alberta, which is a wicked, overly touristy mountain town. Not my favorite place, honestly, to go anymore, except for going to this hotel, this beautiful old hotel. The Rocky Mountains are so beautiful. There would be amazing photo shoot opportunities. One day, I will have the means and the time and energy and to have it be a just absolute bash of an event with dancing and food. And if I win the lottery, I'm just gonna buy everybody a hotel room. We're just gonna buy up the Banff Springs Hotel for like a week, and we're just gonna have a crazy party time. The Rocky Mountains themselves are a photo shoot opportunity, so that is my dream event. It is also a Photoshop opportunity. I keep saying Photoshop opportunity. This is bad. Drape, draft, or commercial pattern. I have not, on the whole, had a lot of success with draping, but frankly, I haven't tried it all that often. Drafting tends to be the way that I go the most often, but it's also because I tend to be drafting patterns that would have been drafted at the time and are much easier to draft than even work with a commercial pattern that will have to be altered beyond all recognition. That being said, I do use commercial patterns. I like using commercial patterns. It takes a lot of the guesswork out of it, and adapting a commercial pattern by making a mock-up first is a way easier time of it a lot of the time, especially when you're working with an era that you've never worked with before. But most of the eras that I work with and most of the patterns that I work with, I can do at least some drafting most of the time, and I'm finding more and more that that is one of my favorite ways of doing things. So I'm actually working on a video right now where I'm going to be trying out a bunch of different drafting guides from different periods in history, and I'm so excited to share that with you all. I think you're going to have a lot of fun. Are you team cut or team trace in terms of pattern, paper, or pieces? I'm both. It really depends on the pattern. So if it is an antique pattern or a pattern where there is only one size or something like that, where I'm going to be needing to do a lot of work with the actual pattern pieces in order to change them up and make them fit me, or where I don't want to risk ruining the original pattern paper, I will trace onto my Swedish tracing paper. But if I'm relatively confident by either having worked with the pattern company before or having a really good idea of the type of pattern that I'm using, that it's going to fit me and that I'm not going to need to do a bunch of mock-ups and a bunch of alterations and adjustments. I'll cut out the pattern pieces just because I find on the whole that it's just easier for me to store. It's easier for me to remember in the future if there's multi-sizes, which size I used and which size worked for me. I tend to cut out unless there is a very good reason for me not to, because I find it easier. Pins or pattern weights? Pattern weights. Pins drive me crazy because I always seem to move either the pattern piece or the fabric out of place. Something gets wrinkled, something gets mucked around, something gets messed up, and I just can't handle that. I have pattern weights all the way. Even if you don't have real pattern weights, I have used candles and tins of food and books. Anything but pins. I just constantly mess it up. I don't know how other people do it. What skill would you like to learn? I would love to learn weaving. I mean, really any kind of weaving, but I think tablet weaving looks super cool, and I have promised myself that I actually need to stick to a single hobby for a while instead of adopting 3 new textile art hobbies. It is on my list, but I'm waiting for essentially having a bigger place in order to make room for new supplies. Even I know tablet weaving is super small. It's just tablets. I understand they're this big. Like, I am so jam-packed to the gills right now with our space already. I cannot add to that pile. So no more hobbies until we have a bigger space. For the time being, it's just a wish, but I think in the future I will hopefully learn tablet weaving or card weaving, what have you, because I think it's a really cool skill, and I think being able to make my own trim would be super fun. How many pieces are lurking in your UFO bin? Are you like looking for a number? Because I don't know how comfortable I am with answering that question. All right, let's go. Okay. Now, in fairness, this is also my mending pile, but I consider them to be one and the same, so bear with me. $15. It's occurred to me that that's just the bin, and that there are definitely things hanging around the apartment that aren't in the bin. So let's say 15 plus. What is your favorite tool to use? I think like putting aside the ultimate favorite tool, which is the Singer 27 1924 sewing machine, which is I think a bit of a gimme. Let's see. I think no matter how long I sew, I think no matter how long I'm making costumes, the French curve is going to always seem like magic. It is always going to seem super fancy. I cannot explain why. It is a curvy ruler. That does not seem like it should be really interesting, but I always feel so dang schmancy whenever I use the curved ruler that is the French curve. Oh, that's so lame. Oh well, I can't help it. I can't help it. I don't have a lot of fancy doodads. All of my tools are super lo-fi for the most part, when it comes to sewing at least. So yeah, French curve. Oh, I'm such a nerd. What did you do or learn in the past year that you were most proud of? My Ella Enchanted cosplay was such an incredible learning opportunity in just about every way possible. I learned all kinds of weird crafting techniques having to do with the kinds of things that some of my cosplay friends do that I've never tried before, and I learned so much. Like, I got into foam clay and acrylic paint, and I got myself a Dremel tool, and I learned what Plasti Dip was all about. I got interested in molds and casting and things like that. And then on top of that, I got really into jewelry making, and I got into a new era of fashion, and I handmade that entire gown in 1 month, which I still can't believe. It seems absolutely unfathomable to me. I'm looking back on it now and realizing just how little sleep or other things I was probably doing or getting. I mean, on the one hand, I maybe shouldn't be as proud of that as I am. I'm more proud of the outcome than I am with how I did it, and I don't necessarily feel like I'm proud of having done it in a month, but I'm really proud of having done it, of having handmade this beautiful ball gown. I love the look of it. I love wearing it. I love that it holds up as a set of stays and as a ball gown, even though it was just so much my first time with so many of those techniques and so many of those things, and there are a couple of things that, wow, I did not do correctly or well. But it looks so good, and it was such a fun creative outlet to get my sort of creative juices working in terms of this character that I had in my mind who would be wearing it. That wasn't something that I'd really ever done before. It was always just going to be me, Liz, wearing it, and Liz wears whatever she wants to wear, whereas Ella is a character in a book and she's fixed in text in certain ways. And so I had this lovely little bit of constraint, which is a great opportunity for invention and creativity, and so that was awesome. And definitely Ella Enchanted, the cosplay from earlier this year in January, which does not seem like that long ago. That was 6 months ago, guys. Moving on. What costume would you like to revisit? I would really love, when I have a bit of a better grip on this particular era, I would really love to have a second go at that English gown, my robe à l'anglaise. I think that on the whole, I did an exceptional job, considering that that was not an easy first-time garment from the 18th century. I am surprised that it turned out as well as it did, given how little experience I had at the time. It still turned out great, but I would really love a second chance at it. I think that knowing what I know now and knowing what I could have done to make that better, especially when it came to the front bit and the robings, but for now, to the future. Best sewing tool you ever invested in? Invested in. Invested in. Do you pick a project and then procure materials, or collect materials and let them speak to you? It depends on the project. I have a lot of fabric in my stash. I get fabric mostly from things like estate sales, rummage sales, and my mother's stash. I try to use that stuff up first, but occasionally I will find that a project that I'm thinking of just doesn't work for any of the fabric that I have in my stash, either because it requires more yardage that I have in any particular fabric, or because the material in question is just not something that I have. You don't tend to get a lot of pure wool at estate sales and things like that. When it's something that's very specifically specialized, when I'm looking to adhere to some kind of historical accuracy as much as possible, I will make fabric purchases, but I very rarely purchase fabric retail unless I have a project in mind. What are your goals/plans moving forward? I think that people who have been watching my videos for a while have seen me turn very sharply towards material culture and analysis in general that is in a slightly broader scope than just costuming. I think that people may have noticed also that I'm talking a little bit more about literature and a couple of other things. I think that going forward, I really do want to dive into historical examination of things like clothes and fashion and history in a much broader context. I want to be able to talk about literature, and I want to be able to talk about objects that aren't necessarily costume or fashion related. Beyond the life of the channel, some of my goals and plans, I am doing some, right now, very cursory, very preliminary research into things like master's programs, but we'll see. I think that it's at least an interesting avenue to research for the time being, so we're gonna see where that goes. Do you have any sewing assistants, in brackets, pets? Yes. We have a weird little mutski. Her name is Rosie. She's a cutie pie, and she hasn't featured in a lot of videos recently because these have been mostly talking head videos, and she is short and does not appear on camera when the camera is at this height that it is right now. But longtime viewers of the channel will see her pop up occasionally, especially when I'm working on the floor. That is the Rosie domain. She loves to bother me and get in my way. She is mostly responsible for the pauses and outtakes in LizCapism videos because she likes to express herself with whining and with drinking water extremely loudly. These are her two love languages. Historic costume, most... Rosie doesn't approve. Parallel to the seam line. She's a very good assistant though. No complaints. She's best dog. Do you have any bad sewing habits? I think I have all the bad sewing habits. You name it, there's a good chance that I do it. I'll sew without doing mock-ups first. If I make mock-ups, I will not do them completely. I don't check grain lines first. I don't measure twice, cut once. I will very, very often start making marks and notches on the right side of the fabric because I haven't checked which is the right and which is the wrong side. There's a lot of stuff that is the, best way of doing things, like best practices for sewing that either I never learned or I learned and then deliberately ignored. I tend to have to learn my lesson pretty hard. So far, luckily for me, I don't make these things for other people. I make them for me, and if I can live with the mistakes, then so can everyone else. Do you sew over your pins or take them out as you go? Oh boy, I sew them over. I very rarely take them out. Usually only when they're actually getting in the way of the presser foot, and that's usually when there's a particular kind of texture of fabric or there's a extra fold or something like that, and it impedes the movement of the presser foot, but otherwise no, I sew over them. And yes, it is one of my very bad sewing habits. And yes, it has caused the death of many a machine needle. You'd think I would have learned my lesson from that one yet, but no. No, that one's still going strong. Machine sewing, barefoot, socks, or shoes on the pedal. I so rarely have socks or shoes on while I'm in the house. The idea that you'd be wearing shoes in the house at all is very odd and strange to me, but maybe that's just me. Maybe I'm the weird one. We're all weird. Who are we kidding? I only ever usually have bare feet. In the winter, when it's minus 40 degrees outside, I'll have slippers on in the house, and that usually means that I'm sewing in my slippers. But even then, sometimes I find if I don't have my barefoot on the pedal, then I don't know how hard I'm pressing. Maybe that's a sensory thing. I'm not sure. My feet are claustrophobic. I don't wear shoes unless I absolutely have to. So the idea that you would have shoes on in your house while you were sewing is just anathema to my brain. So. Do you put your pins in parallel to the seam line you're sewing, or do you pin perpendicular? Unless it's very fancy or very, very delicate, I'll do it perpendicular. I do it parallel only in cases where I've got a really narrow seam allowance, or I have to be super careful with the fact that the two pieces can't move at all, that kind of thing. But otherwise, no, I'm perpendicular gal. Tea, coffee, or chocolate? Tea and chocolate. I don't like coffee. I've never really enjoyed coffee. I like coffee flavored things. I like my sugar syrup, whipped cream, and milk with a dash of coffee. I love tea and I love chocolate. I cannot choose between my children like that. You're just going to have to accept the fact that I have chosen both tea and chocolate. What do you like to watch or listen to while sewing? Mostly I like to watch movies that I've already seen a million times or TV shows that I've already seen a million times. That way I don't have to have my eyes on the screen, I don't have to know what's going on, I can just let the sound, the familiar, cozy sounds wash over me. So some greatest hits from the list of movies that I rewatch a lot are Murder on the Orient Express, Gosford Park, QI, which is a British quiz show. I really like stand-up comedy as well, so I watch a lot of that. People like Sarah Millican, Björk Das, Dara O'Brien, Dylan Moran. These are my go-tos. I know it hasn't aged well. I know it is a problematic fave. I can't help it. I will rewatch Friends through at least once a year. I really love that show. Oh, it's such trash, but... Anyways, that's the end of my 21 questions. So thank you very much for hanging around and listening to me prattle on about various things. I really appreciate it. I hope you got to know me a little bit better, and I am so looking forward to Costube Symposium. I'm going to be making, I think, 2 videos during that weekend, and I'm going to be hyper promoting everybody else's stuff. I'm so excited. I've seen the topics of a couple of the videos that are going to be made. I've seen kind of glimpses into a few of the things that people are making, and I'm so excited for you all. I cannot explain. It's going to be amazing. So follow the Costube Symposium Instagram down below. It is going to be just off the hook. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you soon.